Hello, everyone, and here we have a new story. Before we get to that, I want to ask you to subscribe, like, and be sure to write comments in order to participate in the development of the community. Write how to improve my community, current topics, and the stories you are interested in, and much more. I read and listened to all the comments. People write me stories by mail from different countries. There are problems with translation. I apologize for this. I will work on it and try to fix these errors. I want to thank everyone for their support and the people who wrote to me by mail. Broadcast news stories. New videos on my channel are published once every 2 days at 7 p.m. Don't forget to put a bell in order not to miss new videos. And now let's go. Hello, I've been thinking for a long time about telling you my story or not, about what happened to me and my family. There's such an expression that quarrels cannot be taken out of the house. We lived together for 25 years, 18 years in an official marriage and 7 years in a civil marriage. During our civil marriage, my wife gave birth to my daughter. During the official marriage, my wife gave me a son. We haven't had any major scandals or quarrels in all this time, only at the very beginning of our life together, when we determined the status of her and my parents. Of course, we had minor fights, but we learned to give in to each other. I'm not going to tell you how we lived before this incident. I will only say that we did not live poorly. We had our own place and a country house. We also had a car and an apartment that belonged to my wife. We rented out this apartment. It all started when my wife decided to get a car license. I was very surprised by this, because I've repeatedly offered her to study for a driver's license, but she replied that she was scared, and it was enough for her that I was driving her. I thought, well, if you wanted to, why not? She passed the exam and was given a driver's license. I bought flowers and a gift for my wife. I booked a table at the restaurant with light snacks and a couple of bottles of martinis. Of all the alcohol, my wife only drank martinis. After a while, my wife expressed a desire to have her own car. My wife didn't want to take a cheap car initially. She immediately insisted on the Mercedes brand. It got me a little hooked because I had a Ford, and at that time I didn't have that kind of money, and none of my arguments could convince my wife to take something cheaper. I resigned myself and thought that we only live once. If she wants a good car, then I'll buy a good one. In one of the car dealerships, they picked up her car in the right configuration and issued a loan. I began to notice that when my wife left home, she began to devote more time to her appearance. She looked at herself in the mirror from all sides for a very long time. Of course, I was very interested in why she was dressing up like that, to which my wife replied that she will go shopping with her friends and having lunch at some cafe. At that time, my wife began to ignore my offers to spend time together. Of course, I didn't like that my wife was spending time without me. We've always been together before. Plus, this expensive car bothered me. Only the children were glad that Mom had become a personable lady. Our children had their own worries. Everyone had their own family. The son lived in another city with his wife. I noticed that before there was enough money to live on, but now they have become sorely lacking. My wife spent not only her own money, but also from the general family budget. We had a shared bank card that we replenished after receiving our salary. I noticed that my wife stopped topping up the shared bank card, even though I paid the car loan. To the question, what happened? My wife replied that the tenants had moved out of her apartment and she had started repairs. My wife practically stopped cooking, so I had to cook in the evenings. But that's not all. I also cleaned our house and did the laundry every time. My wife used to do all this. My wife also started to stay late at work. She motivated this by the fact that it is necessary to work out a car loan, but it didn't make any more money. On the contrary, our family was running out of money more and more and more. She often didn't pick up the phone when I called her. I tried to talk to my wife, but it didn't work out for me. Suddenly, my daughter and her husband came to visit us. At the moment when my daughter's husband went out for a smoke. By the way, I don't smoke and I've never even tried it. My daughter told me that a week ago she saw her mother with some young man. A little later, she called her and heard a man's voice, but it wasn't my voice. After that, I tried to talk to my wife again, but she refused and I failed again. I got suspicious, and I asked my wife directly if she had a lover. My wife looked at me like I was crazy and asked if my head was okay. She hasn't talked to me like that in a very long time. After a while, my wife bought a new mobile phone. But my wife's new phone disappeared the next day. I stopped transferring money to a shared bank card. And for the first time in so many years, we had a big scandal. Our daughter put the dots on it. She came to visit us and said that she had entered the apartment that belonged to my wife. She couldn't get inside because there was a new door and a new door lock. And my daughter started knocking on the door and a young black guy opened it. He didn't want to let my daughter in, but she said the flat belonged to her mother. And if he doesn't let her in, she'll call the police. The most important thing is that my daughter found her mother in the apartment. She was wearing only a short silk robe. To the question, "What is going on?" my wife replied that she had come to check the contents of the apartment. Comparing everything with the words of my wife, she should be with her friends in a cafe. I called my wife, but the phone was disconnected. She arrived about 3 hours later. My daughter and I sat and waited for her. My wife came into our kitchen and silently took a bottle of martini out of the refrigerator and poured herself a glass. Then she drank it in one gulp and said, "Think what you want, but I'm leaving you. I fell in love with someone else and he loves me." My daughter asked her, "Isn't this the black guy she saw in an apartment today?" As it turned out, this guy has been living in her apartment for 2 years. We had a long family conversation. My daughter tried to convince her mother not to jump to conclusions, but it was all useless. My wife sat and silently nodded her head sometimes. That same night, my wife left. As it turned out later, she met this black guy near the supermarket. He worked there as a parking attendant. For a closer acquaintance, she needed a car. I can't explain why everything is so difficult. All this was told to me by a close friend of my wife who tried to dissuade her from this relationship. A month later, my wife had sex with him in the car. Another month later, my wife evicted the tenants and her lover settled there. My wife supported him. She really started working overtime and spent all the money on her lover. The most interesting thing is that my wife registered her lover in the apartment. But it happened after our divorce. Yes, we got divorced. My wife did not divorce. My wife did not demand the division of property. My lawyer was completely perplexed. This was the first time this had happened in his practice. My wife only took the car. In a joint marriage, we bought only a garage and 2 cars. I inherited the country house and apartment from my parents. It's been 1 year since our divorce, and what do I find out? My wife's lover invited 2 more of his brothers to live with him. As a result, the 4 of them now live together. But this is not the limit. He wants to invite the wife of one of his brothers. By the way, she has 3 children. My ex-wife realized too late that she was being used. They absolutely do not have enough money to live on, because both of his brothers don't work. After a while, they sold my wife's car. She hinted to me that she would not mind returning our relationship, but pride does not allow this to be done. She understood that I would not forgive her and there was no way back for her. Now my wife is trying to kick everyone out of her apartment and decides everything through the court. But I do not even know if she will succeed or not. That's the story, friends. If you liked it, give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new videos. Now let's move on to the opinion of the author of the channel. The opinion of the author of the channel. According to tradition, I want to wish strength and patience to our hero. Your wife made her own choice and was punished. This can be called karma. You have made the right choice and in no case forgive your wife. I think you will find a worthy replacement. Your children understand everything and are on your side. Just move forward and start a new life. Most importantly, don't look back. If you have watched to the end, I want to say thank you very much. I love you all. Thank you for joining me on this exciting journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. I appreciate your support and encourage you to subscribe, like, and share this story. Your participation and feedback are invaluable for shaping our content and promoting mutual understanding and community growth. Until we meet again.